Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we are continuing on our longest period of them all, period 7, chapter 22. So let's get into it. We ended with World War I last time, so now we're going to talk about the Roaring Twenties and the stuff that comes up during it, titled The New Era. All right, so same thing goes with this background. This background is horrible to have red, to highlight things in red. So everything is highlighted in yellow. So whatever you need to write down is in yellow. All right. It's not that bright because the brighter I made it, it looked ugly. So anyways, 1920 census. This was the first time in American history that more people lived in urban areas than in rural areas. A lot of people living in cities, not farms. You have new technology with the radio, and by the end of the 1920s, almost every single family had a radio. And trains developed the diesel engine, so now they can go farther, they can go faster, and it's all because of the diesel engine. Some labor changes. The standard of living rose for many workers. You have welfare capitalism, which was created or thought of by Henry Ford and many other business leaders. So he gave his workers a shorter work week, higher wages, and he actually paid for their vacation time. And, you know, if you want happy workers, that's what they always wanted, right? So this system's kind of going to end in 1929, you know, during the Great Depression. So the average income for workers was about $1,500 a year, although $1,800, can you imagine that? $1,800 was needed to maintain a minimally decent standard of living. So there's still, you would call that the poverty line, I guess you could say, decent standard of living. Anything below that would be in poverty or something like that. So, you know, still workers, yes, they saw some increase, but, you know, it's not like life altering. And then you have the American Federation of Labor, that union led or created and led by our guy with the coolest last name, Samuel Gompers. The AFL stint in the 1920s, they still didn't include unskilled laborers in their union. Kind of stuck up their nose at them. There's Henry Ford. So women, they worked in what is called pink collar jobs. Yes, in today's terms, I guess that would be sexist, but you know, you have secretaries, sales clerks, phone operators, and they were kind of the lower paying jobs. African Americans in the 1920s were janitors, dishwashers, garbage collectors, etc. And therefore, both women and men were excluded, left out from the AFL. You have a big African-American leader during this time, A. Philip Randolph. Should I offer extra credit? Yeah, let's offer extra credit. Extra credit that you'll be able to use on your Unit 7 exam. What does the A in A. Philip Randolph stand for? Always wondered why they call him A. Philip Randolph. Hey, Philip, you know. Anyways, he founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. And what they did for African Americans was increase wages, shorter working hours, et cetera, et cetera. And he would become an influential civil rights leader during the 40s and 50s. Japanese Americans were, once again, subject to discrimination out in California, our state. passed laws making it difficult for Japanese to even buy land out here. That's A. Philip Randolph. So during this time, businesses are still going to associate unions with being subversive. This is still during the first Red Scare, at least in the beginnings of the 1920s, first Red Scare, where unions are being associated with being communist. So you have 1921, the Supreme Court upheld that picketing was illegal by unions, and therefore courts could issue injunctions and have these protests stopped. So farmers, this is what's one of the main causes of the Great Depression. Their production outweighed demand. Even when World War I ended, they're still producing, still coming up with quantities for World War I demands. And well, when you have a surplus in things, when you have a lot of stuff, a lot of crops, prices will fall and plummet. So you might see this on an APUSH exam, but when in doubt, farmers never will decrease their production of crops until the New Deal, until FDR and all his alphabet soup of programs tell farmers that they need to kind of cut it out because they overflowed the markets and people don't, the demand is not there. And farmers are like, well, I need to make money, so I need to keep producing. And it works in reverse. They're hoping to achieve something called parity. And the purpose was to ensure that farmers would get back their production costs because, it does cost a lot of money, buying grain, waiting, and then harvesting your crops, all that production and sales stuff and sending it off via trains and all that. Farmers hope they get that production cost, get paid for that work, and it would be passed by Congress, but vetoed by Calvin Coolidge. All right, so you can't talk about 1920s without talking about the culture. And it's kind of the culture we have today. It's that consumer culture. The increase in spending of new appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, vacuum cleaners, all were created during this time. The automobile, cars. By the end of the 1920s, about 30 million cars were around in the United States, which led to the development of suburbs. So now people can live out in, I guess you could say, go back to the rural areas that were just made up of homes and, little shopping centers, suburbs. Fremont is considered a suburb of San Francisco. So if you want to think of it that way. And this would increase in travel and vacations thanks to the automobile. Charles Lindbergh, he was the first person to fly across the Atlantic without a radio from America to Europe. He flew to Paris. He would become an overnight sensation. About a full day of flying. It wasn't like planes like today. Okay. I believe it's like 27 hours he flew. Can you imagine? A flight from New York to London or whatever is about 6 hours. So there you go. Advertising. So this was a new booming industry, which was heavily influenced because of World War I propaganda. Now they're going to turn to, advertising. There's a book, The Man That Nobody Knows, where they said that Jesus was the first salesman. Interesting. Newspapers increased in circulations, the creation of magazines, Time, Reader's Digest, those things are still around. And then you have something called the Jazz Singer. And this is the first talkie, because that's what they called it, a talkie movie, the first movie with sound. You need to know it. You need to memorize it. The jazz singer. So you got Charles Lindbergh and his Spirit of St. Louis airplane. And here's the advertisement for the jazz singer. Okay, women. Professional jobs for women included fashion, education, teachers, social work, and nursing. Most middle-class women still, however, did not work outside the home. Motherhood in the 1920s, a guy named John B. Watson believed that mothers should rely on experts for raising children. Oh, man. That sounds just like what it means, trying to tell mom how to raise their own child. A big name woman you need to know is Margaret Sanger. She will advocate for birth control and contraceptives. And birth control during this time is illegal, and in many places across America, it's very illegal. And this is going to upset very fundamentalist Protestants, religion, Catholics too. Birth control, bad. Flappers, you know, those kind of new appearances for women. So it was more of an image than what reality shows. They had short or shorter dresses and short hair, bobbed. They smoked, they drank, and they danced the night away. The National Women's Party was created by, or their leader was Alice Paul. And remember, we talked about her before, where she proposed the Equal Rights Amendment, and that failed. So I think this is Margaret Sanger. This is a flapper. Her hair is bobbed. She's wearing shorter. She's showing skin, meaning her ankles. And we've seen this. This is Alice Paul. New culture. So education, high school and college attendance increased drastically during this time. And schools are going to play a larger role in social development, like, you know, sports teams and clubs and all that. Then you have something called the Lost Generation. It's a group of writers who, you know, have a pessimistic outlook, really. And this Lost Generation is kind of includes from, you know, World War I veterans who just, you know, they are going to resent middle-class ideals. They felt betrayed by society because, you know, they kind of went off to war and came back a changed man. So you have two big Lost Generation authors, Ernest Hemingway in his famous novel, A Farewell to Arms. And you have H.L. Mencken, Smart Set, or he wrote two books, Smart Set and American Mercury magazines. And these were criticizing, again, middle-class values. And this will be similar to the Beat generation of the 1950s. So if there's ever a connection between, if you see on the test between Beat writers, the Beat generation, and the Lost Generation, again, middle-class ideals, because, you know, after World War II, that consumer culture goes into hyperdrive. And you have the Harlem Renaissance, which is the promotion of African-American culture through poetry, music, jazz, music like jazz, literature and art. They focus on discrimination that African Americans faced. And Langston Hughes, one of the main proponents of the Harlem Renaissance, is "I am a Negro and beautiful." Is a famous quote he wrote about. You also have Louis Armstrong comes to popularity during this time as well. So there's Hemingway, there's Langston Hughes. That's not Hemingway. I think that's the H.L. Mencken. All right, so conflict of cultures. So now we're going to have some problems. So prohibition, remember the 18th Amendment made it illegal to consume, buy, sell alcohol. They called it the Noble Experiment. It was popular in the South and the West. But there are some problems, okay? People like to drink. There was weak enforcement, and many people were hostile to the law. They wanted to break the law. They thought the law was stupid. So many government officials were easily bribed. That's going to increase only with organized crime. And you can't talk about organized crime without Al Capone. There's a huge demand for illegal alcohol. So these bootleggers like Al Capone, Jay Gatsby, would have alcohol shipped from Canada and other places into large cities like Chicago, New York, Detroit. I don't know about Detroit. I'm just saying big cities at the time. And they're going to flourish with crime. Again, Al Capone, notorious gangster, was very popular. He is attributed for the St. Valentine's Day massacre, where 7 gang members were killed in one night. Al Capone killing his competitors, killing his competition. So you have what nativism. Again, nativism is still rampant throughout America. Sad. And you're going to have nativists leading, trying to restrict immigration. Right? They don't want more immigrants in the country. So they're going to pass two acts in the 1920s. You have the Emergency Quota Act of 1921, which restricted the number of immigrants from a country to 3% of the total people of that country living in the United States in 1910, the 1910 census. So think of it this way. If I got 100 Irish Catholics living in the United States in 1910, 3 people, because it's 3%, 0.03, 3 people would be allowed to enter America at that time. However, this is going to favor Southern and Eastern Europe because there weren't that many Italians and Romanians and Slavs. So if there were none, they could, I'm not saying they could swarm in. There were probably still some limitations, but a lot more. This is kind of what leads to, the new immigration during the 1920s. And then you have another act which tries to subdue or limit that act, that immigration, with the Immigration Act of 1924, where quotas for foreigners were cut from 3% to 2%. And they used the 1890 census, and that's going to hurt these new immigrants, these Southern and Eastern Europeans, because there weren't that many immigrants from there living in America. And also excluded Japanese immigrants. And this marked the end of unrestricted immigration to America, and no longer could you willy-nilly just travel to America and enter in here to achieve that American dream. So there's Al Capone, and here's a famous cartoon where people from Europe are getting funneled through to the United States, and it says 3% rate, Uncle Sam. So more conflict. You have the KKK. Again, they're going to reemerge, mainly due to this, anti-immigration and, of course, the discrimination of African Americans. Remember the film Birth of a Nation, which was a full-length film that glorified the KKK. By the mid-20s, 5 million Americans paid dues as members. That's disheartening. Scandals, including embezzlement, helped lead to the decline of the Klan. You also have the monkey trial, the Scopes monkey trial, Scopes evolution trial, whatever you want to call it. And the Tennessee government was willing to pay a teacher. It was a Tennessee law that was passed that it was forbidden to teach evolution in schools in Tennessee. I think one of these groups that was against it was looking for teachers to stick out their neck and teach evolution. John Scopes volunteers. He was a biology teacher from Dayton, Tennessee, and he was arrested and for violating the Tennessee law by teaching evolution. The prosecutor was William Jennings Bryan, and the defense attorney was Clarence Darrow. And this is where I believe Darrow kind of rips William Jennings Bryan. It was broadcasted on radio, giving a speech about how evolution exists, and kind of discredits William Jennings Bryan's arguments. But in the end, Scopes was found guilty. He had to pay a $100 fine. And this is going to fuel religion versus secularism in education and across America for many more years. And Democrats in the 1920s, you have Alfred Smith, who is a Roman Catholic. He's going to run for the Democratic ticket. Obviously, he will lose, and we won't see another Democratic candidate until our school, JFK. So, Birth of a Nation, here's Scopes, and there's Alfred Smith. Okay, I believe this is the last slide. Okay, so Republican government. So in the 1920s, we saw an end to progressive legislation, including progressive Supreme Court decisions, and there was, that return to normalcy that Warren G. Harding kind of campaigned with. However, there was a Teapot Dome scandal where this Secretary of the Interior, guy named Fall, transferred land to his department, then secretly leased this land to oil companies and took hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes. Just like President Ulysses S. Grant, Warren Harding and his presidency was associated with corruption and scandal. Bad. And then you have Calvin Coolidge, who was Harding's VP, would become his president when Harding dies. And he's going to advocate this laissez-faire, hands-off type of government where, the government's not going to interfere with companies in the 1920s trying to make that bread, trying to make that money. Of course, you got to know this guy, Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon. He is going to advocate for tax cuts for the wealthy, this trickle-down economics theory, which would be highly advocated by future President Ronald Reagan. And here's a cartoon with the White House highway is this way, and you have the oil scandal. This is the Teapot Dome. All right, so there you have it. That's the end of this lecture. Hopefully you did enjoy, talking about the 1920s, talking about stuff that happened 100 years ago. Kind of crazy when you think about it this way. But yeah, those were things 100 years ago that happened. So if you did enjoy that, make sure you smash that like button. And as always, mumbling my words, and as always, stay safe, wash your hands. Peace.